Yes.
You want one seat?
You said one seat. You said one seat right here.
All right, awesome.
All right.
Appreciate the opportunity.
We are here with the commissioner of the SoCon. So I have a couple questions for you here.
Go ahead.
So first question, it's fourth year atop the SoCon, and that's like a senior year because we're talking about football, so it's almost like a senior year.
Okay.
So what's some of the
I get
biggest
5 years
things?
of eligibility though.
Yeah.
So.
Oh no, you're not done.
Okay, all right,
grad
okay.
school. You got grad school.
That's right. That's right.
Well, what's some of the things you've learned so far since being commissioner?
Every day is a learning experience, and I think the big thing that you really have to think about is learning to synthesize information and then use that information to try and take us in a direction that our presidents are comfortable with and our athletics directors are comfortable with. And you got a lot of different perspectives on any topic, whether it's financial, whether it's academic, whether it's philosophies related to competitiveness, postseason participation. So in all of these decisions, I don't get a vote. I have to try and create alignment around whatever the topic might be. And so that involves a lot of listening, a lot of one-on-one conversations. I think it involves a lot of confidentiality, honestly, to take in information that people share with you in confidence, not divulge those confidences and share them as you put this information together in a way that allows you to move people forward and comes to alignment around taking progress on whatever the topic might be. So that's really the biggest thing. It's a very ever-changing landscape, and the national piece contributes to that without a doubt.
So you have to wear a lot of different hats when you are being commissioner. Make sure that you really just follow the guidelines that the president set for you, and also make sure you live up to the national and stuff like that. How would you say it is dealing with the other conferences?
So you mentioned the guidelines. I mean, we really, we operate from bylaws. I mean, that's one of the core responsibilities of our office, is to make sure that whatever the membership has decided, that we're enforcing those rules in a way that provide competitive balance, those types of things. So that's a key piece for sure. As it relates to the relationships with the other commissioners, it really depends on what the topic is. You've got from the SEC and the Big Ten at one end, G6, FCS, and then some who don't even have football. So finding shared commonalities is really a key part of that, for sure.
For sure. Let me just set this up just as a backup recording, just to make sure.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So next for you, how do you envision the football season? Of course, you're starting with football media. So how do you envision the football season setting the tone for the rest of the sports throughout the SoCon?
Well, I mean, look, football, as I mentioned in my remarks, football from a viewership standpoint, from an attendance standpoint, gets more eyeballs and more engagement than any of our other sports. Basketball is obviously very important to us, but on a strictly single-day basis, we'll have far more people who are watching a football game on a SoCon Saturday, whether it's in person or on TV, than we'll see in a typical basketball weekend. So it sets the tone in that it's a chance for campuses to come together, alumni can come together, and it's hard to it's hard to have a rallying point around a poetry reading on campus. Like football does it. It brings people together in a social setting. You get back together with your friends, your teammates, and brings the students together. It gives something to happen on the weekends. Like it's not an accident. It's a cultural phenomenon nationally, and our schools take advantage of that in really meaningful ways. And as I travel around the conference, it's great to see how each campus puts their own spin on that.
Yeah, I got to go to a Furman game a couple years ago,
nice.
And got to see that whole environment and things like that. So that was very good.
Yeah.
So you mentioned traveling around.
Yes.
There's one more spot you have to travel to this year.
Yes.
Tennessee Tech. You guys added them. So talk to me a little bit about conference expansion. Are we done at 10 teams? Do you anticipate more? It's too early to tell.
It's a good question. Excuse me for a second. A lot of talking today. I'm losing my voice.
I'm gonna get one after this.
Yeah. So a couple thoughts on that. One, I travel to all the campuses. I'll see one football game on every campus. I try to do that every year. I will go to Tennessee Tech's first game as a SoCon member when they play Monmouth at the start of the season. And the membership question is a really interesting question. We're at 10 in football, we're at 11 in some other sports, we're at 9 in other sports. So I think when people think about membership, they tend to look and gravitate toward how many schools do you have, and what makes for good scheduling arrangements. And that's a component of it, but brand strength of the institution, the leadership of those institutions we might consider, the academic quality of those institutions and their athletic competitiveness all matter. And then the other piece is the geography piece. I mean, we, unlike other conferences, have focused intently on maintaining our geographic footprint. And as a result, there are schools that we probably just won't consider based on that sole factor. So working through those questions, whether that's football specific or across all sports, is something that happens at the highest levels. The CEOs are very involved in this. I talk with them regularly about this topic. There's constant monitoring of the landscape as relates to what's involved there. And we make sure that there's awareness of what's happening, and you want to think about expansion in one of two ways. One's much better than the other. You want to expand out of opportunity, which is a positive, and you don't necessarily want to expand out of necessity, which puts you on defense and you're expanding in a tough situation. So that's how we think about it in general. And as opportunities present themselves, we'll make discerning judgments about what to do in those situations.
Yeah, and of course, did the media rights deal come before or after conference expansion for you guys, the extension of the ESPN?
Oh, that's a good question. Tennessee Tech was added, and then we signed our extension.
Okay.
So yeah.
Did that help with the process of the extension, having another school, another maybe market?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you get into expectations that we have at our schools and in the conference in terms of minimum number of broadcasts, revenues, those types of things, like those are all factored into the calculus that happens with ESPN. And we've also signed an extension with CBS Sports Network for basketball, so we've doubled the number of exposures we have there, and then we've got our linear exposure with Nexstar. So more people who watch, more people who care, more people who are invested in what we're doing. There's compound interest on all these things, and it's very real. So having good, positive experiences, high-quality institutions that have good fan bases feeds on itself in ways that helps grow what we're doing.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that another aspect you talked about, and even Dave talked about when he started, was the back-to-back conference champion Mercer. But before that, 6 different conference champions. And that's a lot of parity that you guys have at the top every year. You never know who's going to win. You can kind of predict it, but even then, it's one of the most competitive conferences across the board. Everyone plays each other. That's another plus.
Yep.
But on the other end, when it comes to the football teams, and you look at the Big Sky and Missouri Valley, they're kind of top heavy, and they have like a couple teams at the top every year. What advantages do you think you get from having the parity in the conference compared to the other schools where it's like you have Montana State at the top, and they're fighting every year? Those teams, you can count on them to make a deep run, but you guys, it's more everyone has a shot.
Well, I mean, look, the advantage is, and it's both sides of the same coin. The advantage is, look, we're in an area of the country that has the ability to have close rivalries. That helps. Everybody playing everybody every year helps those rivalries. And we're drawing many of our athletes from that same footprint. So those are all positives. The challenge that you get is that it's also an incredibly football passionate fan base at other levels. So when you're dealing with an Auburn or an Alabama, you're dealing with Georgia, you're dealing with Tennessee, like those games, those game times matter in the local communities, and sometimes those games can butt up against each other in ways that might impact attendance or viewership or whatever it might be. So all workable. We work on that in the scheduling process. Schools obviously account for that when they're putting their game times together and trying to figure out what time they want to play. So far more positive than negative for sure. The Big Sky comparison is an interesting one, and you mentioned the Montanas. Montana doesn't have any professional sports teams, and they don't have any FBS institutions. So their worldview and their approach and the focus in that state on those two teams, and I would imagine as a large state institutions, many of the people who have gone to those institutions stay in state, feed those rivalries in different ways. They obviously generate revenue. So they're different approaches to the same question, which is how do you improve your product? How do you improve the competitiveness? And it takes resources, and you have to have those resources in order to be successful.
For sure. And another aspect that is ever changing, transfer portal.
Sure.
And of course, you guys had some of the biggest losses of any conference last year. Buck Buchanan award winner, he hits the portal. Jerry Rice award winner hits the portal. What are your thoughts on the transfer portal when it comes to FCS football and the SoCon and how it impacts it?
So that's an excellent question. I'd say a couple things. The transfer portal in and of itself is only one part of the equation. The transfer portal linked with economic opportunities is the other part of the equation. So I'm very comfortable that the experience our athletes are having across all of our campuses is exceptional because of the leadership from our presidents and the expectations they have for their athletics programs. The challenge that you get is that you've got people in people's ears, whether it's agents or others, saying, hey, think about this, look at this opportunity, etc. And sometimes that guidance is good, and sometimes that guidance isn't always good. And so what will be very interesting to see is this 5-and-5 eligibility situation, whereas before you had 5 years to play 4 years. So you kind of had some opportunities. Football, if you only played 4 games, you got your whole year back. That's not the case anymore. There's an expiration date on every single season and every single game with no red shirts after the fact. So whether athletes will think about this question differently, and in particular say, I'm going to value playing time more than a check early in my career for the opportunity to have significant NIL opportunities later in my career. So everybody always bets on themselves, as they should.
Sure, especially at this level.
Absolutely. So, but you can have it all at this level. I mean, you can have a great educational experience. You can, there are programs that are clearly providing NIL money to athletes. But getting your education paid for continues to be the central question. And then for those who have exceptional talent, there's going to be opportunities out there. Last thing I'll say about the transfer portal is the issue that we have is supply and demand is out of whack. And what I mean by that is if you look at the professional levels, there's only 32 NFL teams, and there's only 40-some, 50-some slots on those rosters. And the demand, the number of players who want that opportunity is exceptional. So they can choose the best of the best. At the collegiate level, in all sports, the supply and demand are completely flipped. There's hundreds of teams, FBS, FCS, G6, etc. And then you've got hundreds of other teams in basketball, soccer, whatever it might be. Way more teams and not enough talented athletes to fill those teams, which is driving the market in ways that I don't think were ever anticipated. And we're seeing a lot of really interesting spending choices at programs as they try to make sure they're as competitive as possible. And the bidders just keep going head to head like it's an auction, wanting to get the best painting out there. And maybe it's a Bob Ross, maybe it's a Rembrandt, I'm not sure which, or maybe it's something else, maybe it's a finger paint, like you never know until they get on campus. So hard to tell, but that's a real factor. The supply and demand issue is real for sure.
Yeah, and you mentioned that the spending, and that wants to get me to my next point about the conference budgets. I saw some data come out recently about some of the conference budgets and how the SoCon compares to some of the top other schools in the FCS. So you have Chattanooga, number 18, at $6.6 million for their operating budget for football.
Okay.
And then you have Tennessee Tech, newcomer, $5.8 million. So do you feel like it's any need to get into that top 20, top 10 when it comes to operating budgets for the schools?
That's an interesting question. There's a correlation between resources, but it's not one-to-one. If the biggest budget won every game, we wouldn't have to play the game. So you got to get out there, and you got to prove it on the field. How people spend from an operating budget perspective can really vary. Some might invest in coaching, some might put it into facilities, some might say we're going to put it into athletes, some might say mental health, athletic training. So everybody's got their own way they want to figure out how to win and be competitive. and maximize the benefits that they have on their various campuses. Some appeal to the mountains, some say, hey, you can be in a military experience, some are closer to the beach, some are in bigger cities, some are in very remote areas. Like, every athlete has a different story that they're telling, and so, look, the dollars help, but that is not the only reason and the only way people are choosing schools. And so, investing wisely, and some of the schools you mentioned, for example, Tennessee Tech is redoing their football stadium. That's probably contributing to some of their budget.
For sure.
Western Carolina is redoing their football stadium. That's going to contribute. So, the arms race doesn't stop. Choosing what you're going to do in this to be a part of that arms race is a really interesting question. I'm not a military expert, but if you watch what's happening, there's a lot of conversation about drones. Drones are not particularly expensive, but they seem to be very effective in a whole variety of ways. Somebody's going to figure out what that model is at the football level and go, well, why don't we just do this instead? It'll allow us to be more competitive, make discerning judgments, and put us in a position to be successful. So let's see where those go, but all of those factors are the never-ending chess game that our schools and coaches go through to try and win games on Saturday.
And I love that you mentioned drones. You're doing good with the segues today.
Okay, all right, good.
You mentioned drones, so that gets me to my next point. What is something that the SoCon is doing to innovate and, stay at the forefront when it comes to all of the college conferences?
So the replay process that we just went through to select Speedio is really what I would point to right now. So we were using one of the original replay systems at our football replay booth and for basketball. I mean, it was easily a decade old, might be 15 years old. And in the world of technology, the half-life is about 6 months. So you can imagine how dated that material was. And the company decided they weren't going to continue to support it. So we had to go out and find a new option. And we looked at a lot of different providers and ultimately feel really good about Speedio as a partner. It's all cloud-based. There's no carrying hardware around. Okay. The camera images are incredibly good. And they've integrated AI into a lot of what they're doing. And as our administrators for the officials and our coaches have started to see the capabilities of this platform, I think they're going to become increasingly comfortable with this, not only from a replay standpoint, but from a available tools standpoint as it relates to coaching, being able to video capture things, watch it, not real time, but watch it right after the play happens, so you can say, okay, what just happened here? So I think we've put tools in place for success, and then each school has to figure out what's the best way to maximize those tools to their advantage.
So we can look forward to some new instant replays this fall.
Absolutely, no question. We got to integrate them into the broadcasts, but certainly on a decision-making calls situation, that'll be the case. No doubt.
So we might not see them all the time, but they are going to be happening.
We're working on trying to figure out how we get those into the broadcast for sure. That needs to happen. We'd love to have it happen.
And one question before I let you go that I'm going to be asking every single person who comes over here, but it's going to have a twist for you because, of course, you're not any one team. You're over the entire conference. So give me one word to describe SoCon football this year. What can we expect? One word.
I'm gonna give you 3. It's all here. It is. I mean, it's we are unbelievably competitive conference, and as the polls start to take shape, as the voters get into their business, as the NCAA committee starts to dissect who's worthy of postseason opportunities, I'm very confident and comfortable that we will see our teams perform in an exceptional way this year that will allow us to have multiple teams in the postseason, allow our teams to be successful, those that make the postseason, and go from there.
All right, that's all I got for you question-wise. Yep.
All right, appreciate your time.
All right, thank you.
Always a pleasure. Thank you for being here.
All right, guys, that's Commissioner Michael Cross here. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Good to see you.